Hi, my name is Claire Thompson. I'm 29 years old, the granddaughter they tried to erase. While my grandfather lay in the ICU fighting for his life, my parents drained every cent I had saved for him, $990,000. Money meant for the surgery that could keep him alive. I can still hear their voices. My sister smirking. We need it more than he does. My father sneering like it was nothing. He should just die and stop wasting resources. It wasn't just theft. It was betrayal, cold and deliberate, delivered by the people who were supposed to stand beside me. I remember standing in that living room, the air thick with their indifference, my chest tight, knowing they had no idea what I was about to do next. Have you ever had your own family betray you like that? Tell me in the comments, because what I'm about to share isn't just about money. It's about survival. And the ring of my phone that night was the sound that set everything in motion. But that call was only the beginning. I didn't build that account overnight. I started at 19, hauling boxes in a freezing warehouse for barely more than minimum wage. Every Friday night when my friends went out, I stayed late, counting inventory with numb fingers, telling myself it would be worth it someday. My grandfather's first heart scare came the year I turned 20. And I promised him I'd be ready if it ever happened again. That promise became my compass. But back then, the bank wouldn't let me open the account alone. Too young, they said. I needed co-signers. My parents sat across from me at the branch desk, smiling like they were doing me a favor while the manager slid the papers over. "You'll thank us one day," my mother said. I signed because I had no choice. I never thought those signatures would become a knife. Over the years, I poured everything into that account. Overtime checks, side contracts, even the bonus from the first cardiac monitor shipment I landed on my own. And every time I hit a milestone, I told them. Not once did they say, "Well done." Not once did they ask about the hours I'd traded away. Birthdays came and went without a word from them. I graduated, no card, no call. But the one time Lydia wanted money for a business venture, they suddenly remembered my number. When I said no, she spat it back at me like an insult. "You think you're better than us." I carried that silence for years, convincing myself they just didn't understand. But the truth is, they understood perfectly. They just didn't care. And when I finally saw the bank records, I realized their betrayal went deeper than I ever imagined. The morning after that phone call, I sat at my kitchen table, the brass pocket watch my grandfather had given me ticking softly beside the laptop. I logged into the account again, hoping the numbers had somehow come back, like maybe it was all a glitch. But the screen didn't lie. Zeros. I called the bank, my voice thin with panic. The representative on the line was polite, detached, like she'd said it 100 times before. "Funds were withdrawn yesterday afternoon, authorized by your co-signers." My heart sank. Co-signers. That word I hadn't thought about in nearly a decade. My parents. I drove to the branch in person. The lobby smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, the same way it had when I first opened the account. Susan Hartley, the branch manager, looked up as I approached. Her polite smile faltered when she saw the paperwork I slapped on her desk. $990,000. I need to see the authorization. She hesitated, then gestured for me to follow her into a back office. A screen flickered to life as she pulled up the footage. And there they were. My father, leaning back like he owned the place, and Lydia, pen in hand, sliding across a signature line that wasn't hers to sign. Susan froze the frame, zooming in. "That's your signature line," she said quietly. But the handwriting wasn't mine. The loops were wrong. The slant forced, careful, like someone imitating a language they didn't speak. My stomach turned. They hadn't just stolen the money. They had forged me right out of my own account. Susan printed the still, slid it across the desk. "If this goes legal, compliance will have to testify." I signed the request log for a copy, my pen stalling near the bottom, leaving a tiny ink blot, the same way my grandfather always did when writing checks. That quirk was in my blood. The forgery on the screen had none of it. For the first time in days, I felt something other than despair. Proof. They tried to erase me, but the paper trail spoke louder than their lies. And then came the note. 4 words that changed everything. "Check the safe deposit. The note was scrawled on a folded slip of paper, slipped into my hand by a young teller as I left the branch. Check the safe deposit. I couldn't ignore it. An hour later, I stood in the cold marble lobby of the downtown bank, the massive steel vault yawning open like a beast. Evelyn, the attendant, led me through the chilled hallway and logged my name in her book. Funny, she said, squinting at the page. Someone was here just 3 days ago. Lydia. My stomach tightened. The drawer screeched as it slid out. Inside was a thick cream envelope sealed with wax, my grandfather's handwriting looping across the front. For my grandson, only when the time is right. My throat caught. Beneath it, receipts. Gold bullion purchased the very day the account was emptied. The gold wasn't here. Then I found the black velvet case. I knew it instantly. My grandfather's cufflinks. He wore them to every family wedding, every funeral. I opened it, but only one cufflink lay inside. In the empty space was a crumpled scrap of paper, with a name and an address scrawled in uneven ink. A storage facility out of town. I slipped it into my pocket, slid the drawer shut, and walked back into the sunlight. That's when my phone buzzed. A text. Just 8 words. You're digging too deep. Stop now or he dies. The world narrowed. They didn't name him. They didn't have to. My grandfather, still in that ICU bed, his life already hanging by threads of wires and machines. For a long moment, I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the note in my pocket, the text on my screen. Any sane person would have called the police. But this wasn't random. This was close. Too close. If I tipped my hand too early, they'd bury the trail, and him with it. I closed my eyes, breathing through the fear until it hardened into something sharper. Resolve. If there was a seam in their scheme, I would find it. And I would pull until everything unraveled, because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about life and death. The address on that scrap of paper led me to a run-down storage facility on the edge of town. Rows of corrugated metal doors groaned in the wind. Inside one unit, I found wooden chests, ledgers stacked high, and a hidden camera with SD cards labeled by date. I slid one into my laptop in the cab of my truck. Grainy footage flickered to life. My sister Lydia sat at a table, a man in hospital scrubs beside her. They pushed a heavy case across the table, papers sliding between them. Lydia's voice cut through. He'll never know until it's too late. My stomach lurched. On the man's chest hung a clipped hospital badge. He wasn't just some middleman, he was staff. That night, I met Detective Harper in the shadows of an unused observation room at the hospital. He'd been tracking unexplained patient declines for months. When I showed him the footage, his jaw tightened. Organ trafficking, he said flatly. And your family just made themselves part of it. We set a time, 2:17 a.m. The ICU hallways glowed pale, humming with machines. My heart hammered as a gurney rolled past. A patient too still, Nurse Dana pushing with practiced calm. Beside her, the man from the video carried a cooler. My pen camera clipped to my jacket recorded everything. They swiped a card at a side door. Stainless steel counters glinted inside, refrigeration units humming. My chest tightened. Dana's head snapped up. Her eyes locked on mine. "Hey!" she shouted. The man bolted, not for an exit, but straight toward my grandfather's room. I ran, the pen camera bouncing against my chest. The door slammed open, and there he was, syringe poised above my grandfather's IV. Before I could shout, Harper tackled him, the syringe skittering across the tile to stop near my shoe. Guards poured in, dragging him and Dana out in cuffs. I turned back to my grandfather. His eyelids fluttered, his hand finding mine in the tangle of tubes. Weak, but there. Still alive. For the first time in weeks, I let out a breath that didn't taste like fear. But the real reckoning came hours later, in a conference room where every mask finally slipped. By dawn, I sat in a hospital conference room across from the people who'd tried to erase me. My parents. Lydia. Their faces looked carved from stone, but I saw the cracks, the twitch in my mother's jaw, the way Lydia's smile wouldn't hold. Detective Harper laid my pen on the table, pressed play, and let the footage roll. Every second was there. Dana's steady hands, the man with the cooler, the swipe of the keycard, the glimpse of that cold stainless steel room. Then came the financial trail, withdrawals tied directly to offshore accounts. My father's name, my mother's, Lydia's. The administrator slid a packet of documents across to me. Your grandfather established a trust in your name before he fell ill, he said. $990,000 for his care. Effective immediately, their access to family assets is revoked. For a moment, the room went silent. My father's fists flexed against the table. Lydia's mouth opened, then snapped shut. My mother stared straight ahead, as if refusing to see what was in front of her. I signed the treatment authorizations with a steady hand. For once, there was no shaking, no second guessing. When I slid the papers back, I didn't look at them. They rose without a word, leaving the room one by one, their footsteps fading into the sterile hall. Harper leaned close. You did more than save him. You broke their chain. Later, I returned to my grandfather's room. Morning light spilled through the blinds, striping his blanket in soft gold. I sat beside him, his hand still warm in mine, the brass pocket watch ticking steady in my pocket. I wasn't thinking about what they'd stolen anymore, only what I'd fought to protect. If you've ever been erased or betrayed by family, remember this. You are stronger than their lies. Share your story below. You're not alone, because sometimes survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about choosing who you refuse to become. Wherever you're watching from, morning coffee or late night quiet, I'd like to hear your story in the comments. And if this one stayed with you, subscribe to join a community that believes strength isn't silence. It's knowing when to speak.